Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 47th level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Turford, the level 99 human archmage, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 elf medic, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Monday evening, good sir?
I'm doing good, man. I just, I wanted to let you know, if you didn't listen to Shaq, I am playing Shining Force in
I
full throttle.
I not only saw the tweet, but I also saw
Yeah,
you talk about it. I had missed the live show, otherwise I would have been in the chat like freaking out.
like
Because
going crazy.
I'm so happy to hear that you're enjoying it though. That's awesome.
It's fun. It's just it's snappy. It's
Mhm.
quick. Like
Yeah.
I didn't imagine an older game being like that.
Mhm.
So no, it's a very good. So I mean, I wouldn't say service level. It's just a good strategy RPG
Yeah.
that's like on the Sega Genesis. I'm like, cool.
Which
Sounds good. Pretty
again, like
straightforward.
never happens, especially like with RPGs on Sega. You got that, and you
Hmm.
got Phantasy Star, and that's pretty much
And that's
it.
it.
But you had at least you had 4 good Phantasy Star games, and then 2 really good Shining Force games, and then you've got Shining in the Darkness if you like first person RPGs. But
Oh,
there's actually some good stuff there. Again, that one's also made by Camelot too. So that was their first game, I
no.
think. So
Definitely need to play the first 2 on Switch. It's on Nintendo Switch Online, so
yeah,
I'll definitely play those 2
yeah, for
on
sure.
Switch.
Anyways, we should probably, clear the dungeon of the pesky mobs to get this show going. So,
Do
folks
it.
at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, if you're watching right here on the live stream on YouTube, youtube.com/carpoolgaming, of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. Of course, like this video, comment in the video, tell us, what some of your favorite games from Obsidian are. We would love to hear from you. All that good stuff definitely helps the channel grow. Also, if you're listening to us on audio feeds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. Whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you listen to us on podcasts, our podcast can be found there. And also just hit that subscribe button. Maybe leave a Apple Podcast review, or maybe leave a reading on Spotify. Also, if you want the audio version of the show ad-free and a little bit early, head over to Patreon. Patreon.com/carpoolgaming is how you do that. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar, and out comes content. And then we also have a merch store, Garret, with the
Oh, we
RPG
do.
Cave shirts. I'm also wearing a PlayStation Drive shirt on the show this week. I wore my
Oh,
RPG
that's
Cave.
looking good.
I wore my RPG Cave shirt last week, and I'm on tour, currently showing off all of our different merch.
Are you the model? Are you merching out on all the shirts and everything and
I
the sweatshirts?
was, but we found a much more handsome model in the form of Nagachaka, who's now been
Chaka.
designated as our new official model. Essentially, the crazy thing is
Sweet.
we're actually probably going to meet Nagachaka next month because we're doing
Oh, that's pretty funny.
we're doing a meetup in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. For the
Nice.
Xbox Games Showcase. We announced this during our 1,000 subscriber live stream over the weekend, and Nagachaka says he's going to be there. So it sounds like we're gonna probably get to meet him,
Cool.
which is gonna be awesome. But one last thing I wanted to get to before we get into the show, and this is something that's pretty important. Garret, we are asking for a favor from the audience.
Yes.
We want to hear
Please.
from you. Yes, you, the person I'm
From
pointing
you.
at with my finger through the camera. Basically, we've created a Google form that we would like people to fill out. This Google form will basically be just a short questionnaire, just asking you a couple questions about the show. But also, what's really important about this is if you've ever thought to yourself, gee, I would love to be on this show about RPGs, the RPG Cave. I'd love to talk about RPGs with Garret and Ryan. This is how you become part of the show, because we want to, bring the community in a lot more on the show and make this a little more community
Definitely.
focused. So fill in that form. Let us know kind of the type of games and topics that you would like to talk about, and kind of leave, a way for us to get a hold of you. And we will definitely try and make that happen and kind of get you on the show with us talking about RPGs. I know we record kind of late, so I know that doesn't work out for everybody, but we wanted to throw it out there as like a cool option in a way to kind of, get people involved. Because it's also one of those things too, where like Garret and I know a lot about RPGs, but we don't know everything. And I would love to kind of bring in some more people as well, from time to time that have maybe knowledge that can maybe teach Garret and I something about RPGs.
I mean, there's so many RPGs that is kind of missing between both of us, like really famous ones too. Like Dragon Quest. I know you probably played some of those, but we don't have a Dragon Quest fan, or we don't have like a Dark Souls fan, or you know, like we need like people who are really experts and like really like, just like into that service and or franchise or whatever, and just have a conversation with us about these franchises, because I think that would bring in a lot more good background, a lot of diverse background too, and voices.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it would be great.
Also, if you're watching on YouTube right now during the live stream, I've actually refreshed the description of this video. So if you hit refresh on the live stream, you'll actually see the link to that in the description as well. So go check it out. It's live right now. But anyways, Garrett, without further ado, now that we've taken up so much of the people's time, let's read from the sacred texts, because it is time to talk about this week's topic. And we're going back to another company retrospective here. We're talking about Obsidian Entertainment on the show. I'm pretty excited about this one. I know you're probably pretty excited about this one too, right, Garrett?
I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
So
Definitely.
we're gonna obviously start this off as we always do when we approach a topic like this. We're gonna start with fun facts, Garrett, because boy howdy,
Give me the fun facts, Ryan.
I got some fun facts from you. So first off, Obsidian Entertainment was founded in 2003 and during its time has created 16 games since 2003.
Cool.
Now, Obsidian, pretty small company, so even though that number doesn't seem huge, that number is pretty big for how many people actually work at Obsidian. Because I think last time I was able to find information, I think there's like 200 people that work there, which is
as of now, studio. Like presently.
As of now, presently, and they're way bigger than they were when they first started. Which I'll get to the actual number when they first founded the company, which is kind of ridiculous to think about nowadays. But it's kind of crazy. 16 games in total, so they've had a really good run. But in order to get kind of the full story of Obsidian, we actually have to go back before 2003 and before basically the founding of Obsidian, because we got to talk about Black Isle Entertainment. So, Garrett, you probably don't know anything about Black Isle. You've probably never played it.
Never heard of Black Isle Entertainment.
Okay.
I'm looking it up right now.
So,
just want to see what it looks like.
Basically, they were kind of a subsidiary of a company called Interplay, which, Garrett, you also probably have never played an Interplay game before, because
probably not. So Black Isles. Okay, cool. You can explain. I'm reading into it.
Oh, good. So Interplay was essentially a big third-party company in the early 90s and kind of in the early 2000s as well. They made games like Clay Fighter, Fallout.
Right.
They also made a bunch of PC games in the 90s. Like, as someone who played, because I've talked about it on the show before, like in the late 90s, I was like pretty big into PC gaming, and at the time, like, Interplay made a whole bunch of games for PC. So that's actually where I kind of know the name Interplay from. And they basically kind of went out of business when helping develop, games like Duke Nukem Forever, or they were trying to do the original version of, like, they were trying to do like a Fallout MMO for a while, because they were the ones who actually had the rights to Fallout before, things like that. So they were kind of a defunct company. But Obsidian, Black Isle Studios was basically a subsidiary of Interplay, and they basically were formed in 1996 to basically help publish and create RPGs and kind of work with some of the Interplay studios on RPGs after the success of the original Fallout. So the original Fallout's creator and director helped basically found Black Isle Studios, and they worked on a whole bunch of games for Interplay, including some really big RPGs that, again, PC players would know these games. Fallout 1 and 2, Planescape Torment, Icewind Dale, as well as all the expansions for that. They also worked with BioWare and helped publish games like Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights. A lot of those PC RPGs that BioWare put up before they started putting out the KOTORs and the Mass Effects, essentially. So they, like, Black Isle has like a rich history of really high quality RPGs on PC, and they were all like CRPGs, so very much like the Dungeons and Dragons style traditional RPGs. Things like if you've never played a game like that before, nowadays the closest thing we get is something like Pillars of Eternity, which oddly enough is made by Obsidian, but also
Right, Pillars of Eternity.
yeah,
And then what else? Divinity.
Divinity,
right?
Original Sin. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
other one I was going to bring up. Yeah, so games like that are those types of games, or it's even something like Disco Elysium is in that style as well.
Yeah, it's in that vein.
But
Got that isometric view
yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
exactly. So Black Isle Studios, though, while they produce amazing games that were actually pretty big sellers on PC, unfortunately, they actually closed down on December 8th, 2003 due to financial difficulties with their parent company, Interplay. Because as I mentioned before, like Interplay was kind of big in the late 90s, early 2000s, but as they grew, they really ran into big financial problems, so they had to shutter a bunch of the studios that they had spun up, and Black Isle Studios was unfortunately one of the casualties behind that. So a bunch of the members from Black Isle knew that this was coming over the summer of 2003. So 5 former members of Black Isle Studios formed Obsidian Entertainment on June 12th, 2003. At the time that they were founded, Garrett, they had 7 employees at the company, including the 5 owners. So they basically...
So the majority is the owners.
Yeah.
And then 2 other side people. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this, of course, included, the director on Fallout 1 and 2, as well as a lot of the people that really helped make those games at Black Isle really fundamental. And then from there, the company started to hire on, former Black Isle employees after they had been let go from Black Isle, and then brought in a lot of other talent. But it's kind of crazy to think about the turnaround on this, because as I mentioned, the company, when it founded in June of 2003, had 7 employees, but their very first game they put out a year and a half later, because
That's crazy.
Thanks to their kind of working relationship with BioWare, and helping kind of, publish and work on some of those games, BioWare trusted them with the sequel to Knights of the Old Republic. So the very first game from Obsidian was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, which came out in December of 2004. So basically from a year and a half from when the company had 7 employees and was founded, to a year and a half later, they released a full game, a full AAA game.
That's insane, man. Yeah, no, it's the founders, producer, designer, programmer. It's all Obsidian. It was made on the Odyssey engine. Yeah, it looks like. Do you think? I mean, we're gonna talk about this a lot, but did they actually probably grabbed pre-existing assets from BioWare to build this game?
The engine it was built on was all pulled from BioWare, and as well, and we'll talk about this more, because I definitely want to do a KOTOR episode at some point to talk about more in depth of the history behind KOTOR 2, because it's really interesting, because that's a game that's like famously not finished, essentially.
Okay.
And there's a lot that comes from, and when you look at this design timeline, it makes perfect sense as to why it wasn't, totally finished at the time. It was a game that had a lot of great ideas, and again, like BioWare helped with some of the story elements for the most part, the continuity elements and things like that to kind of, tie the 2 games together. But Obsidian, for the most part, like their writing staff and program staff pretty much did the rest with the assets they retrieved from BioWare from this game, which is just
that's crazy
to think about. But then also they worked on their next game, was also another BioWare sequel in the form of Neverwinter Nights 2, which came out in 2006. So a couple years later they came out with that. Also, what was crazy is during this time they were also working on a 3rd game that they announced in 2006. And I remember this quite clearly because at the time Sega had the Aliens IP, and they were trying to do a whole bunch of different stuff with it and try and do a bunch of different games. And in 2006, they announced 2 new projects. I remember it was in a copy, I think it was Game Informer. They had this like big cover story about 2 new Alien games that they were announcing. One of them was Aliens Colonial Marines, which came from Gearbox.
Great.
But the other one was like a turn-based Knights of the Old Republic style RPG, Aliens RPG, from Obsidian was what was supposed to come out. But as you probably are aware, Garrett, because you've never heard of this game before, this game was actually canceled in February of 2009. So
Yeah.
they got 3 years into development of this one and unfortunately had to can it, which makes me sad because as an Aliens fan, I would have loved that game. And they haven't done anything like
So it
that
would
since.
have been like more XCOM like or something like that?
No, it was
Or
supposed to be like, Knights of the Old Republic, where it's like kind of
oh,
turn-based,
okay.
but you're exploring the map kind of thing.
Hmm.
But it just, in the Aliens universe, which just would have been interesting
That
to
would have
see.
been cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't get like games like that. So I would have loved to see something like that. But at the same time, Obsidian had also partnered with Sega on their very first brand new IP, Alpha Protocol, which I've talked about on the show a few times now, which released on May 27th, 2010. And then later that same year, yes, the same year, they also released Fallout New Vegas on October 19th. So like 6 months later, they basically released another big game. So 2 big games.
They're on a roll, man.
In,
Lots of contract work with this studio. It's interesting to see
yeah,
how many projects they were involved.
exactly. And basically between, 2010 and 2018, that was essentially what Obsidian was doing, is they were doing a lot of contract work. They did a lot of sequels to games that, needed sequels. They also did licensed games, because that's when we got South Park, the Stick of Truth from them. But in 2018, of course, Obsidian would be purchased by Microsoft on November 10th, 2018. They announced it during like EXO 18, I believe, which was kind of their big announcement showcase.
Was it their summer event type of deal, like in Mexico?
Well, it was in November, but it seemed like a summer event.
Oh, that's the one in
Mexico.
November. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Was it coincide with other studios too, or was it just Obsidian?
That was at the point.
Other studios.
That was at the point in Microsoft history where you'd watch Xbox showcases, and every showcase would have a dedicated section to the show that would be like, and these are the studios we bought. Kind of
pretty
thing.
Much.
And they did that for like a year. It was just, there was a segment at every showcase that was like, yeah, these are the 3 studios we just bought, by the way. So no big deal. And of course, now we've got, modern Obsidian games like The Outer Worlds, like Grounded, and then we've got some new games coming out from them as well, kind of on the horizon. But that's kind of the brief history of Obsidian, and those are the fun facts you need to know about Obsidian. So Garrett, what do you think? I think this is an interesting story.
Obsidian is a very interesting story. It's interesting to see their heritage, where they're coming from. I knew they had some connection with Fallout series. I didn't know that was their previous company, or at least the founders were, and they bought some or hired some old employees back in, which is super neat to hear. I like the contract work that they do. It's interesting with Obsidian because I think, they're kind of a magician. Like, they look at a game, they look at whatever assets that this other studio has, and they've done a fantastic job of making it their own. And like, it's not, I mean, like, some of it is you could say it's copycat, but in a lot of ways it's their own identity, and it really shines. And it's, I don't know, it makes other studios look a little well, we can pull out specific examples, but I know other studios is like, oh, that one looks good too, and that's our game, that's our franchise. And it's like, it's kind of weird to see Obsidian kind of struggle with other studios with these franchises, and like, here's our contract work, here's what we made, and it's actually a pretty good product to see. So
well, and the crazy thing is, like, if it and I'm gonna say this just this is just my personal opinion, but if it wasn't for the ending and kind of the rush development of KOTOR 2, as much as I love Knights of the Republic and I think it's an incredible game from BioWare, I actually think KOTOR 2 is probably the better game, both from a writing standpoint and the gameplay standpoint. It's just the ending just falls off a cliff, and that's the only problem with it, with me personally. Like, and there are some story elements that don't exactly work. I know that someone will probably call me out that, but I know personally, like, that game in particular really hit me in a way I was not expecting, which is just kind of crazy. And yeah, just White Seal Deer in the chat, by the way, saying Obsidian is amazing at repurposing. Can't agree enough with Garrett. And they also say KOTOR 2 is an awesome game. Mods really brought it back to life on PC. Yeah, I've only ever really played it on Xbox platforms. I've never really played the PC version of KOTOR 2, although it did get some 1X enhancements when they brought it to backwards compatibility. So it actually looks really good on current gen consoles. But yeah, it's just, there's something about the story in that game that's really impressive. And then Fallout New Vegas is another game that, again, like Fallout fans like more than Fallout 3, even though Fallout 3 was this big critically acclaimed game like Garret Bland. But the biggest problem that they had, at least in the earlier days of Obsidian, is because of the rushed nature of a lot of their development at the time anyways, with a lot of this contract work, their games for the most part were usually buggy messes or had some kind of developmental issues with them when they launched. And I was telling Garrett this kind of off air before we started, there was actually a famous glitch in Fallout New Vegas, if you played it at launch, where if you killed a certain enemy, I believe it was a sheriff who wore a cowboy hat.
One of the sheriffs, yeah.
Yeah. And you pick up the cowboy hat and you wear the cowboy hat, you can't take the cowboy hat off, because if you do, it crashes the game and deletes your save. And that was a problem that persisted for a long time until they finally, found a fix for it in that game. So I mean, there's little things like that where they were always like, when you go back and read old reviews for Obsidian games, is really interesting, because a lot of them are like, yeah, this game's really awesome. Like, the story is great, characters are great, the gameplay is great. But if it wasn't for the bugs, we'd rate this game higher, kind of thing. Like, especially if you're reading Fallout New Vegas reviews in particular, are like really harsh on the game for that problem. Same with Alpha Protocol reviews are kind of in the same boat as well, unfortunately, which is too bad.
Gotcha.
Because I actually think those are two games that really, like, if you look at the lens through the lens of 2020 or 2022, I think they actually hold up a lot better than the reviews gave them credit for at the time.
Oh yeah, well, definitely, because they've updated the games, they fixed the bugs, so they're good now. Fallout New Vegas plays excellent on Xbox Series X, and it's you can play it, on Steam just fine on any really kind of PC you want. Fallout New Vegas was my first Fallout game. Absolutely love it. I think maybe because I lend that a little bit more favor just because that's my first Fallout game. So even though it's a great game and I think it's my favorite game, I wouldn't say it's like better than Fallout 3. I think they're both really, really good. So yeah, New Vegas, I just like the player agency in that one. The Obsidian does a good job of like making your own like choices, especially in Fallout New Vegas. And then I'm looking down the list of Obsidian games, what they have posted on their website.
Yeah.
Other than the games that you mentioned, Ryan, there's this one game I've seen it a lot, like around, like on Steam and GOG and stuff. Tyranny. You ever heard of that one?
No, I saw it on the list while doing research, but that's a game I have never played.
Yeah, it looks like its publisher is Paradox Interactive, which is interesting. It was back in 2016, and it looks like it was just kind of a back to the Neverwinter Western RPG, computer RPG type of style there. So it looks like, they still have some of that CRPG DNA. I can see them totally making more of these type of games, other than what they have currently in projects right now.
Well, they still got Pillars of Eternity as well. They're still working on.
They do have Pillars of Eternity.
Well. Yeah.
Yes.
And I would imagine,
pretty interesting to see.
I would imagine they do another Pillars of Eternity game, because we just got the console releases of Pillars of Eternity 2 in 2020, and I would imagine like after Avowed comes out and after the Outer Worlds come out, you probably see like a Pillars of Eternity 3 at some point, because I think that's kind of the series they're kind of banking on with the CRPG stuff.
And it's kind of crazy how Obsidian just loves to talk to publishers, because you got KOTOR 2, that's the first one with BioWare. And then you got Alpha Protocol, that's with Sega, right?
Yeah.
Fallout New Vegas is with Bethesda. Dungeon Siege 3, which we didn't mention, that was a Square Enix published game.
Also, hilariously, if you look at the release date for that, Garrett, it's like 5 months after Fallout New Vegas came out.
Oh my goodness. And that's why we don't mention that game, and has very mixed reviews on Steam.
Yeah.
South Park, The Stick of Truth, that's Ubisoft. And then they did their own thing. Tyranny was Paradox Interactive, and then Outer Worlds was Saber Interactive, right? No, Private Division.
Yeah, they're Private Division, so that was with 2K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was with 2K. Got it. Yeah. They're part of that. So, and now they're under the Xbox umbrella. I'm sure every game going forward will be Xbox
Oh
published.
yeah, they've already announced
But
that Outer Worlds 2, for example, is not, a private division of game again. It's
mhm,
only Xbox is publishing it anyways.
yeah.
It still
So
might
it's
come to
super
other
cool to
platforms.
see their
But
history.
yeah.
Yeah, their history of just like going to these different publishers and like, hey, we're here, we're ready for work.
Yeah.
Do you have a game in mind?
And we got to make money
We're
somehow to
here
keep
to.
the studio afloat. So please give us,
Right.
all the money to make all the games, please. Thank you.
Yeah, they certainly filled a gap in the business though, and they stuck by. But I think they really struck home when Xbox bought them
Yeah.
or Microsoft bought them back in 2018. It's like, all right, we got it, security. Now we could just do pretty much not whatever we want, but like a lot of cool, more ambitious projects
Yeah.
in
But also
mind.
allows them
So
to give them the freedom
cool.
to do something like Grounded, which is like totally different from anything else in their wheelhouse, and kind of do their
Yes.
own thing with a game like that. And I don't think that they would be able to do a game like Grounded if they weren't under the Microsoft umbrella. I mean, they still might
Mhm.
try and do it, but it wouldn't be like this big ambitious project that they're trying to make it out to be, essentially, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
I like how grounded just came out to be because I remember the story behind it. It was just like 3 or 4 people in a small team just thought about this game. It's like, all right, let's just like have our own little spare time and develop a pitch to our own company, Obsidian. Is like,
Mhm.
okay, now it's like it was like 3 or 4 people. It was
Yeah.
not much people developing for that game, and then they made something and made it early access for Xbox, and they have that route now to like spin off cool ideas. I like Grounded and what I played of it. Hopefully, they put like a 1.0 update or like a big update behind it so I can
Mhm.
possibly go back into it. It's
Yeah.
definitely cool though.
Yeah, I remember like Sean Capri and I and a bunch of other players from the community. We actually played Grounded one night on Sean's stream, and really enjoyed it. But it's just we got to the end of the story and we're like, well, what else do you do from here, kind of thing? Because that was back kind of in the early days when Grounded didn't have a lot to it. So
Hmm.
I think we're kind of waiting for it to eventually get like its 1.0 release and kind of make sure
Hmm.
all the story is actually there, because the story that was there was really interesting. But it was
Yep.
just I don't love playing incomplete games like that, that are like
Right.
that have like really
It's an
interesting
early
stories.
access game.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to wait till the stories actually finished first before going back to it. But
Hmm.
yeah, that was a game with like a lot of really cool ideas and interesting thing like that. That's one of the things I've always really liked about Obsidian is they bring a lot of like really interesting ideas to the table, like things that you wouldn't normally think about that you would see in games. Like just the combat system in something like South Park: The Stick of Truth is like it takes
Hmm.
like what the role playing genre does, and not only parodies it in a comedic way, but also like the way you initiate combat in that game, like the way you cast spells and stuff like that, is like so different from anything else you see
It's
in
very
like
different.
other RPGs, but totally
Yep.
works, and it's a lot of fun. Combined, of course, with the story and how good it was, or even
Hmm.
little elements like even in their first game with KOTOR 2, they added this element to the KOTOR experience that allowed you to basically create Jedis out of your other party members. And one of the cool things that you could do, actually, if you were evil, is you could take your Jedi counterparts and then turn them to the dark side. And then it was this whole like
Interesting.
quest chain you had to go on, and you kind of had to figure it out because the game wasn't going to tell you all this stuff. But like finding the right moment to basically taking and like twisting your party members and to your bidding and kind of making them join the dark side with you is like such a cool thing in games that is just something we haven't really seen in games since then. So
Hmm.
I love the fact that they take risks on games and they try
Yes.
different gameplay elements and try and think outside of the box with this, a lot of this stuff for sure. So yeah. So Garrett, I gotta ask you then,
Yes.
now that you have the list in front of you of all of Obsidian's
Yes.
games and you played a bunch of these games,
I have.
what are your favorite games from Obsidian?
Well, I think the games I've played are my like I there's really not a worse game than the other. So I've played 4 of these games. I've played Fallout New Vegas, South Park: The Stick of Truth, The Outer Worlds, and Grounded.
So I'm gonna make it really
If
difficult
I
for you, to Garrett. I'm gonna make you
Yes.
pick your top game from that list, because I was gonna give you
Oh
top two,
goodness.
but Grounded is kind of an incomplete experience. So if I gave you 2 out of 3, that's making it too easy
That's
for you.
true.
I need you to pick between your children
Yeah.
on this one, Garrett.
Oh, Fallout New Vegas definitely is like my number one child there. South Park, Stick of Truth is definitely number two to me. I really enjoyed that game. Although I really just didn't like the action-based cues
Mhm.
in that game. It felt off to me, and I don't know why. I think that's just me too. I don't like action-based cues in my turn-based games. That's just how
Okay.
I am. Like Mario plus Luigi, like I cannot stand those games. And then like Mario RPGs like that, I could probably get by with Mario RPG, but yeah, I don't know. Action-based cue, turn-based games, and I think I'm good. And then the Outer Worlds is definitely kind of the weaker of the three. I enjoyed it. It was just I don't know, man. Outer Worlds, it left a sour taste in my mouth at the end of
Mhm.
it. Just the ending. Really, the beginning had a lot of promise and potential. It's like, cool, I got my companions, let's go. And I just think it kind of just fell flat at the end. A little stale to me, but
Yeah.
that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Outer Worlds is an interesting one too because like that's a game that you can beat like in an hour if you want to, if you know all the right steps and you know
you
exactly
really,
what to
yeah.
do. Or you could play it for like 100 hours and go explore everything. But it wasn't.
Hmm.
I don't think it was nearly as big of a game as something like Fallout New Vegas or something like that. Like the map, even in that game,
Hmm.
is bigger than all of the planets kind of combined. If you combine them into one map, in a
True.
big way,
Yeah.
which is interesting. But I'm always the type of person too where I like smaller open world stuff. So I actually liked Outer Worlds a lot. Especially too because like
Hmm.
even though I know it has a bunch of endings, but I was actually pretty satisfied with the ending that I had, and then I never really had to go back to that anyways. But I actually think, to be honest, looking back, my favorite game from Obsidian is actually probably South Park, the Stick of Truth.
South Park. Okay,
I'm
cool.
someone who
It's so funny.
yeah, I'm someone too who doesn't even really like watching South Park, like the TV show or anything like that.
Hmm.
But I used to like watching it in season 1 and 2, and then I just fell off and never kind of went back to South Park. But Stick of
Hmm.
Truth, though, there's something really special about the writing in that game, and
It really
exploring
is.
South Park, and even though I know that the action combat didn't really jive with you, I actually liked that. Believe it or not, it
Mm.
kind of kept me on my toes and kept me kind of feeling engaged with the gameplay in a way that most turn-based games that some turn-based games don't anyways. And I've talked about that when talking about games like Legend of Dragoon before and other games like that. Like
Hmm.
I'm the type of person that's probably okay with Mario RPG, but I kind of dislike that game for other reasons that I'm not going to get into here. But South Park, I felt like it was also like the perfect length for a game as well, perfect length for an RPG. Like
Yes.
it never overstayed its welcome or anything like that. And I just again just there are certain moments here that I wish I could spoil that I just can't. For anyone who hasn't played the game before, but there are certain moments in that game where I just was like on the floor laughing and just
Hmm.
couldn't believe that some of the places you got to go in that game, or some of the crazy boss fights that you'd have in that game, was just super cool. So
You go to places, man. You go to freaking Canada. I'm
I
just
didn't
letting you
want
know.
to spoil
It's
it, but there you go. I mean, that's the truest version
I'm
of Canada
sorry.
that exists in any game, Garrett. That's just what we're like here, okay?
You got the split heads and
You just
and,
can't see it
and you're
very well
ready to
through the
go.
camera, but that's just the way it goes. But kind of my runner ups would be KOTOR 2 is kind of one of my
Okay.
runner ups. Even though again, that would have been my number one game if the ending wasn't the ending in that game. But
Mhm.
everything else about KOTOR 2 I loved more than the first game, and the first game is one of my all time favorite games. One of my definitely my favorite Star Wars game in particular. So I love
Cool.
KOTOR 2. I just wish the final part of the game was actually completed, and unfortunately, since it did come out of the original Xbox, the developer couldn't patch it to fix the ending or anything like that. Once development completed, and there was no DLC back then or anything, so it's not like you could really have any add-ons for that game. But I
Sure.
loved KOTOR 2. I thought that game was amazing. Alpha Protocol, of course, I talked about it on the show many times. It's a game that again, just it's a lot better than you know all the hubbub it got when it first came out, unfortunately.
Okay.
And then Outer Worlds is my game after that because I really like that game. And I just don't really love. And to be fair, I know that there's a lot of CRPG stuff from Obsidian that's also super high quality, but I'm just not the audience for CRPGs, unfortunately.
You're not a CRPG fan. I
No.
gotcha. What was my question? What was? Oh, Alpha Protocol. can you get that anywhere? Because I was looking on Steam. You cannot get that on Steam. It's
Yeah,
delisted.
it's delisted. You have to buy a physical copy of it. That's the only way to play it now.
Goodness.
Yeah, and it's not backwards compatible either. So you got to buy a physical copy and play it on 360 or PS3. Those are your options. I know.
That's a shame.
I know. It's
Wow.
terrible. Yeah. I don't know. I think there was some kind of license. I can't remember the exact story, but I know there's some kind of licensing that caused
Okay.
that forced them to delist it from retailers. But
Cool. I definitely want to check out Tyranny and Pillars of Eternity. I you know I'm not like into CRPGs. Like I don't think I've really ever played like really invested myself in a CRPG. Like I'm trying to think. The closest thing is a Diablo game, and that's not a CRPG. That's like a
no.
dungeon. It's an isometric third-person dungeon crawling game. Um, so, but I think I would enjoy these. I tried Divinity a little bit with a friend,
Mhm.
and I just didn't have fun with. Like I know people have a lot of fun with their friends on these type of adventures, but
Mhm.
I feel like I just need to be myself and truly just immerse my experience with the world
Yeah.
because these type of games are very lore heavy, very characters are written like in pages upon pages, and you go on in adventures with your party members. I would be pretty interested to check it out, especially Pillars of Eternity and Tyranny. Yeah, I'll definitely try those out for sure.
Nice. Yeah. I'd love to hear what you think about them. Whereas because I've been playing, PC games for so long, I mean, it just makes sense that I would come across, I'd see these reviews for Baldur's Gate 2 getting, 98s in like review
Yeah.
magazines and stuff like that. And like, well, I can't ignore that. I got to at least try this game out. And it's just one of those things where as good as those games are, they've just never clicked with me. Like the
Yeah.
pace of them is just even too slow for someone like me in a lot of cases. They're really well written, but I just don't like the way those games played. But I will say though, did you ever play the PC version of Dragon Age Origins, Garrett?
I did not. I played the Xbox version
Okay,
of
because
it.
the PC version
Yeah.
of Dragon Age Origins is also very similar to a CRPG as well, and it's kind of in that
That's
same
true. I
same
mean, like
realm.
you can check out the Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition. Like if you isn't it well, I wouldn't say CRPG, but you can
No,
like
no, Dragon
go
Age One
out fan.
only was the only one that was like
Really?
that. Yeah, the other two they
Why
moved away
is
from
that?
that because they found that CRPGs more because they were under EA and
So
EA.
it was like a completely separate version on PC.
Yeah, it was.
Like a separate game. Oh
Yeah,
my
it was a
gosh. Okay.
completely like the
Interesting.
story is exactly the same, but the gameplay is completely different.
Oh, so it was like an isometric like and
Yeah,
then you had the character in the oh,
and then the
interesting.
cutscenes were still
But
in 3D like they were on the console
mm,
version, but then it would go back to the isometric view for that game.
that's weird.
Yeah,
I would have to check that out. Wow, I didn't know about that.
yeah, it's a completely different game. And again, also you can actually zoom down to the battlefield in from the isometric viewpoint to then kind of see your actions play out like while
Mhm.
you're playing the game, and then you can zoom back up to the isometric perspective as you play it. So yeah,
Interesting.
it's weird
Okay.
to think about, but yeah,
Cool.
they only did that with Origins because again, under EA, they're like, no, we got to make this game more like Mass Effect, because Mass
We
Effect's
gotta
popular. So that's what they did with
keep
Dragon
up with the
Age
cool
2.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
so that's kind of
Cool.
what they did there. But yeah, either way, as you can tell, lots of great games to choose from Obsidian's catalog as far as some of our favorite games from them because they made a lot of great games over the years and they've been pretty awesome. So then Garrett, I got to
Mhm.
talk to you about, the other two games that we know that are coming from Obsidian. That's of course Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2. So first of all, of these two, I imagine you're probably more excited for Avowed, but which one of these two are you most excited about?
Oh no, definitely. Well, I'm interested in both because we really don't know much about these games. Now,
Mhm.
Outer Worlds 2, we can have an idea because it's a sequel to the first game. I'm sure they're gonna just expand the lore a lot, probably a separate story with new characters. I'm interested to see what they do with that world because I think that world's cool. There's a lot of different type of planets and landscapes that they can use. But I know Obsidian. And I know what their quest line's like. I know what their characters are like. So I would just like a different take. So I'm very interested in Avowed because it just screams at me like, okay, this is the medieval like Western RPG that you would really enjoy, like Skyrim, like Witcher 3, but now in a now with Obsidian, which one of my favorite games, Fallout New Vegas, like they made that. So I'm very interested to see how they make this game, and hopefully, I they make their own spin with it too. I don't want them to like just look at Skyrim and look at Witcher and look at other these type of games and be like, okay, let's kind of carbon copy this. I'm sure they'll have their own identity with it. And of course, Phil Spencer's been talking about it too. It's like, yeah, we know that Avowed and Elder Scrolls are, they're kind of similar, but they're really different. They have their own identities. So of
Yeah.
course, that's market speak. But I'm interested. I hope we get to see more of Avowed during the showcase.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm the most interested in.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, Garrett, because actually, like, I wouldn't actually be sad if they made it a lot like the Elder Scrolls games, because who knows when Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. So it's just like Avowed will probably be
True.
out like either next year or the year after, and then Elder Scrolls 6 is probably a 2026, 2027 game at this point. So there's going to be a
Very
couple
far
years
out, yeah.
between them. So it almost, to me, I wouldn't actually be sad if they made it a lot like the Elder Scrolls. But obviously, you're right. Like, I would love to see them kind of put their own spin on the Elder Scrolls kind of formula and throw some new ideas in there. Because as we talked about earlier, I think that the Obsidian's really good at throwing new ideas at games and trying different things with games that you wouldn't have thought of before. So I'd love to see what they kind of do with that formula. Whereas I think like Outer Worlds 2, like, to me, feels like it's going to probably play it a little more safe.
Yeah.
But I mean, you never know. We could be surprised by that, but I'm excited about, but I am finding myself like harder to be excited about sequels versus, new things that from studios that, put out games that I love. So definitely Avowed is definitely, I think to me anyways, the more interesting, and exciting project, but either way, I'm excited to see more of these games. So then if we had to place our bets today, Garrett, during the Xbox showcase next month, which do you think we actually see? Do we see Avowed? Do we see Outer Worlds, or do we see neither of them? I want your official bet on this one, Garrett.
With the news about Avowed going to Unreal Engine 5, I am not so sure right now. Hold on, let me just check real quick. What's the last thing we heard about Outer Worlds 2? Was it just an announcement?
It was literally the announcement trailer with literally no footage, and it was the sarcastic trailer of them being like, "This is what we could put a bunch of footage in this
Right.
trailer, but we're not going to do that." It was just, and then
I
there was the logo.
Yeah, I think Avowed's their next project.
Yeah.
I think Outer Worlds 2 is like, they're developing on both. I think Avowed though is like it was like, this is our major project. Let's hit it home. I know they're transferring to Unreal Engine 5. That can mean a lot of different things. That could mean like, hey, let's port all of the stuff that we did on Unreal Engine 4 and just put it on Unreal Engine 5. Because, you can port a lot of those assets, I'm sure, from one version to the next.
Yeah.
Um,
But they're not
yeah.
gonna want to do that with all the assets, Garrett. There is gonna be a lot of stuff they're gonna have to rebuild from scratch, anyways, because they want to bring in higher quality textures and things like that that will take advantage of Unreal Engine 5 versus just using the Unreal Engine 4 assets for a lot of that stuff. So
What's Outer Worlds 2 on then? Is it
I think
on
it's still Unreal Engine 4, but they literally have given us no information about that. So
There's no announcement on this, by the way. This was just a leak in one of the job positions on LinkedIn that like
that they're moving to
that
Unreal
it's
Engine
going to
5.
Unreal Engine 5. Yeah.
So
Um
yeah,
yeah.
for me, like,
Cool.
knowing the history of Obsidian, I think it's actually more likely that Outer Worlds 2 actually comes out first. Only because, I mean, number one, I think I think that one's not going to get a full Unreal Engine 5 kind of makeover. I think that is probably going to be an Unreal Engine 4 game. And they can actually probably reuse a lot more of the assets from Outer Worlds for that game.
That's true.
Versus Avowed is on like a new engine. We're just assuming it is anyways. It's going to be a new gameplay experience from scratch anyways. And I think that that's going to make the experience come out a little bit later, even if they both come out the same year, and then one comes out at the beginning of the year and one comes out at the end of the year. I still think that that's actually, now that I think about it, I think it is probably in that order. It's probably Outer Worlds 2 comes out first. But to be honest, my bet for the showcase for next month, Garrett, is we don't actually see either of these games. I actually think
Oh,
Game
okay.
Awards at the end of the year, we see Outer Worlds 2 again. That's kind of my bet.
You don't think we'll ever see Avowed this year? Like, it's gonna be
No,
all
no.
in shadow. Mm.
I actually think that, again, if what you were telling me is true about it going to Unreal Engine 5, I think that it's not going to be next, because it's
Yeah,
not next year. So
yeah. So this was according to a LinkedIn profile lead VFX artist Aaron DuBois, who said that the game was recently moved
mhm.
from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if
let's
it
see
was
how this
staying
goes.
under Unreal Engine 4, then I would actually agree that Avowed will probably come out first. But if it's
Hmm.
moving to Unreal Engine 5, and considering what I'm assuming they do with the Outer Worlds too, is they kind of do almost like a Horizon Forbidden West of that system, where they for the most part
Yeah.
take a lot of the assets they had before, add some higher res assets in there, kind of build a new world out of the existing stuff that they have already from the first game, and then kind of go from there. I think that's kind of what they do with that
Hmm.
game, but we'll see.
I'm more interested to see Grounded as well. Hopefully, we'll get some cool new updates this year.
Yeah,
I wonder when the full release of the 1.0 version, gonna be out on
that's something
Xbox.
that actually could conceivable be out this year. At the end of
Yeah,
the year, could be like the 1.0 for Grounded, but who knows?
that'd be cool.
Well, then, Garrett, one last thing I
Yes.
gotta ask you about Obsidian to kind of round out this conversation. What do you want Obsidian to do next after these games? What comes next for Obsidian after Avowed and Outer Worlds 2? Which I imagine, like, by 2024 or 2025 we'll have both of these games. So
Yes.
beyond that, see into your mind's eye, Garrett, what happens next?
They need to grab the inner depth clutches of the Bethesda abyss, the game studio abyss,
Mm-hmm.
grab their home franchise, the Fallout series. It's they are the rightful owners, right, Ryan? Because they were the ones that made Fallout series.
So here's the
Um,
thing, because the teams between the tricky thing about that is that
yes,
the team that worked on Fallout 1 and 2 essentially kind of divided between them and In Exile. So In Exile also, the
right. In
company that does
Exiles in there.
Wasteland, also kind of has a claim to the Fallout IP. So it could go in either direction. But continue your point, Karen. I like where you're going with
Oh,
this.
okay. Sounds good. We're gonna have a mega collaboration involved. We got the Bethesda game studios, got In Exile, and you got Obsidian's like, all right, guys, we got to do it. We got to make Fallout New Vegas 2. Um, I think this could be possible. I know there's a lot of articles and speculation around like it's been talked about. It's like, hey, yeah, a Fallout New Vegas 2 is now possible on Xbox. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible.
Mhm.
I want Obsidian to at least get a Fallout game out. It doesn't have to be New Vegas 2. I just want them to have another spin at it again because I don't think Bethesda is going to go back to that well for years
Mhm.
because we got, Starfield coming out later this year.
Yeah.
Got Elder Scrolls 6 coming out whatever, like 2026 or 7.
Yeah.
And then after that is probably Fallout 5, which will be in 2032 or 33 or something
Assuming they
like
even
that.
go back to Fallout, because there's a possibility they
Yeah.
don't, especially now that
No,
Microsoft
they just do a
owns In Exile.
Starfield 2
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to see some more churning out, not recycling. I just want to see more presence of a classic, not classic, like, the Fallout 3 and 4 kind of foundation. 76, I know a lot of people, there's a hardcore community for it, but not a lot of people like that one.
Yeah.
And no one was really asking for it when we saw it. So I just would like to see another Fallout games coming out of the city. Other than that, I'm sure they'll make plenty of other projects. I'm sure The Outer Worlds is going to be a nice franchise for them to test out. Grounded and Avowed. Maybe they would do a brand new game. I'm not too sure. As you said, maybe Pillars of Eternity is another
Yeah.
game that they can recycle out as well. But I don't know how much more new franchises that they will do after beyond this point.
Yeah.
But
Especially
what
if
do you think?
Avowed is a big hit. Like I would imagine that they,
Yeah.
kind of stick with that. And yeah, you brought it up, brought up the thing I was going to bring up, which is Pillars of Eternity 3 is I think like a slam dunk for what they'll do after this.
Hmm.
There will definitely be another one of those. But ultimately, like what I would really love for them to see is I would love to see them take another crack at a licensed game because I really like
Me too.
their licensed games. I think they create great licensed RPGs. And I'd love to see them take like do a whole like a different spin. Again, I know I'm kind of like chopping at the bit to see what they would do with the Aliens IP, and maybe Disney can lend that out to them. But I mean, they could do all kinds of different stuff. Like I
Hmm.
mean, they could do like I think they could do like a really good turn-based Marvel RPG. Like I think they would be the
Oh, that would be
studio to do
cool.
something like that. Or they could take like a dozen of these properties. Like I would also love that maybe see their take on like something like Lord of the Rings, like WB kind of.
Hmm.
I would love to see kind of them get that license out from
That
WB,
would be
especially
cool.
because WB is now talking about the idea that they want to license out their IPs more. Now that they're trying to sell their studios, and I would love to see maybe them like Obsidian take a crack at like a Lord of the Rings RPG or something like that. Like I think that would be really cool. So yeah,
Yeah, a licensed game would be cool from Obsidian. I would definitely be down for that
yeah,
as well.
exactly. So they could go in a bunch of different directions with this, but overall, I think we've talked about Obsidian to death. I think that Obsidian, an incredible company. I think they make great RPGs, and every time I hear that they're working on a new project, I get really excited for that project. Even if it's something like Grounded, which is
Mhm.
something I didn't really think I would conceivably like, but I was proven wrong. I think that game's actually super fun. So I just am excited to see what they do next. And for Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed, I think they've got a great future ahead of them as well as part of Microsoft. They're definitely one of Microsoft's like better studios in the list of studios they have. And I can't wait
That
to see what they do
that's a
next.
interesting definite or word there. Better. I maybe it's their stronger RPG
Oh
studios.
yeah,
Yes.
definitely when it comes to RPGs for sure. But
Yes.
when you consider, when you're going for overall talent, I don't know if they're as good as
That's true.
an id or something like that. But yeah, you're right. Of like the most of the first party studios, you're right. They're probably like the top ones, especially when it comes to RPGs.
Hmm.
I definitely think they're stronger, or I get much more excited for their games than something from Bethesda Game Studios. That's for sure. I mean, those games are great, but
Interesting.
I'm more excited about stuff from Obsidian at this point going forward.
Okay.
But
Cool.
anyways, before we go, Garrett, I noticed that you actually put
Yes.
another question in there that I missed, and it has to do with Obsidian, so we should probably get to that real quick. It's from Nagachaka, your boy, we're the official, model of the Carpool Gaming merch. He asks,
Nice.
which one do you guys like more, Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 4? And more importantly, why is Nick Valentine the best Fallout companion ever? Of the two, I definitely have to say Fallout New Vegas. But I mean,
Hmm.
we've talked about Fallout 4 on the show, Garrett, and you know how I feel about that game. I mean, the
Yeah.
base building stuff totally killed that game for me. I'm not gonna lie. And I just don't think it's like as well executed as either New Vegas or Fallout 3. But
Hmm.
I already know your answer too. Probably New Vegas, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's New Vegas. Fallout 4, it just definitely it was just a little bit of a step down. The story didn't really make too much sense at the end there. The base building kind of threw me off as well. And I don't know, it was just like, hey, here's another Fallout game. All right, you're
Yeah.
done. And it just didn't really, um, I don't know. It really didn't really go up from Fallout 3 to me in my eyes.
Yeah, it definitely
Let
felt like a
alone
step
New
backwards. That's
Vegas.
for sure.
Hmm.
But as far
Hmm.
as Nick Valentine, I think he's a cool character, but I totally murdered him in my story, and he never became my companion.
Really?
Yeah,
You killed him?
I have a tendency
Oh,
of
okay.
killing most people in Fallout, Garrett.
That's true. That's true. He was like my companion for like ever. I think he was one of my longest companions. I don't. That's the one thing I don't really care about with Fallout and Elder Scrolls is the companion stuff. It
Yeah,
just I don't know, like in Skyrim, I accidentally kill my companions. I'm like,
yeah,
all right, I shot my bow and you just stood right there. So I'm sorry that I should like, hit you in the head there, but You were right in front of me, so.
I turned into a werewolf in front of my companions, and then suddenly they're trying to murder me. So of course I'm going to just murder them and eat their hearts, because that's just what you do when you're a werewolf, right? So there you go. But yeah, Fallout 4 I think is an okay game, but definitely New Vegas, way better. And then with the companions, I never work with them at all. I just, especially like after my experience with Skyrim and Fallout 3, I'm like, nope. Any companions I get before they ask if they can join me, I'm just going to shoot them in the face instead. Just get it over with. Put them out of their misery. And on that dark tone, let's move on to the TheDonRob at Rob Donegan, who asks a question that's interesting, Garrett, because this is actually going to be the topic of next week's show. So we're going to kind of save our answers for this one. This question is, so I've been really enjoying Nobody Saves the World. Garrett also really enjoying that game. Probably finished it by this week. In that vein, what are your favorite bite-sized indie RPGs? Something that you can beat in, say, 20 hours or less. Well, fun enough you asked this, TheDonRob, because the topic for next week's show is the shortest RPGs that you can play, and almost all of them are indie games. So I kind of want to see this discussion for next week, but we will definitely bring TheDonRob back, I think, for next week's show. But
that sounds good to me, man. Nobody Saves the World's great. Go play it. It's on Game Pass. And everywhere else too.
I'm so excited to preach the word that is Half Minute Hero to everyone out there in the crowd.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That game's really good. But anyways, Garrett, we got to get going. But before we go, Garrett, plugs go.
You can follow me on Twitter at Bland Explosion. You also find me on the Nintendo Shag, part of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network, where we release on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the podcast services, and we're live over at twitch.tv/PSVG every Thursday nights.
Ooh, that's exciting. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, on Patreon at patreon.com/Carpool Gaming, and on podcast services around the globe. So, for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been level 47 of the RPG Cave. Only 3 more levels before level 50. And we're out.
Oh, dang. Bye-bye.